Today we are talking about perspective. I'll take you step by step and show you how to use it like a pro. My name is Andre Leroux. Let's begin. We will look at different types of perspective: 1 point, 2 point, 3 point and atmospheric perspective, and I'll show you how to draw cylinders and people in perspective. I will explain each of them in detail, but you can skip ahead. Check out the chapter links in the timeline below. Okay, let's begin with 1 point perspective. If we have a square and we want to make it a cube, the simple way to do that is to add another square behind it, like that. And then just connect all the corners and voila, you have a cube. But this cube is not in perspective. To get it into perspective, we need all of these diagonal lines to somehow converge and to meet up at a single point. Then it will be in perspective. Let me show you how to do that. By the way, I'm drawing this on a computer because I'm making a video. But you can of course do exactly the same thing with a pencil on paper or whatever medium floats your boat. Okay. We are going to start by drawing a horizon line, and on that line we add a point. This is the point where all the lines will meet up. It is called the vanishing point, and you can place it anywhere on the horizon line. Now we are going to add our square again, and then we are going to connect each corner of the square to the vanishing point, like that. You can see our cube taking shape. Now all we need to do is close up the side and the top like that, and look at that, a cube in perspective. And you thought this was going to be difficult. Let's add some more cubes. Let's put one right over the horizon line. No problem, as long as we keep connecting the corners to the vanishing point, everything will work out. Now we are not going to see the top side of the cube anymore. And if we put one above the horizon line, then we are going to see the bottom side of the cube, like that. As long as you keep connecting your corners to the vanishing point, everything magically works out. Of course, you don't need all of the gray lines and the dotted lines that I'm adding. Those lines are just to show you what I'm doing. You can skip all of that and just draw the boxes. Okay, but this is child's play. Too easy. Let's kick it up a notch. Let's draw piano keys in perspective. I'm not going to try to copy this photo. We just use it as a reference. First, I'm going to draw some squares. They represent these squares here, the sides of the white keys. And then every corner connects to the vanishing point. Easy enough so far. So I want the keys to end more or less over here. Now the black keys. Again, I'm going to start with the sides of the keys here. I'm making them slightly narrower at the top because the black keys on a piano are slightly narrower at the top. And again, we connect all the corners to the vanishing point. Now we define the back edge of the black keys more or less over here, slightly above the back edge of the white keys, and then connect those lines down to complete the 5 boxes that will become the 5 black keys. This is becoming a jungle of lines. Let's add some basic shading so we can see what the heck we are doing. Okay, all the lines up to this point are construction lines. So now I'm going over them again and making them clearer with a different color or a darker pencil or whatever you are using. I'm just highlighting the lines that I want to keep. And we can upgrade the shading a bit. We can take this much further with some highlights and bevels and gradients, but let's not get sidetracked. This will do. And if you are still with me, then you understand 1 point perspective. And if you understand this, then the rest will fall into place quickly. But before we go on, let's see 1 point perspective in action in the real world. With text like this, we can simply add a point and connect all the corners to the point. And just like that, we are back in the 80s. Or you can do this, modify the letters themselves so that the vertical sides all meet up at the vanishing point. There are wonderful examples of this on LogoGround, all of them using one-point perspective very effectively. The links to these logos are in the description. And out in the real world, you can hardly look anywhere without seeing one-point perspective in action. The rule stays the same. All the lines converge to meet up at the vanishing point somewhere on the horizon. Keep doing that and you can't go wrong. Well, the artist did mess up with these tiles. That's not quite straight. But hey, maybe that's what the floor really looked like. And the artist was just being honest. Maybe the builder who was responsible for the tile job is the one who messed up. Yeah, I'm blaming the tile guy. Moving on to two-point perspective. With one-point perspective, we could do stuff like this, connecting the diagonal lines to a vanishing point. That's easy enough. But what if we want to draw the cube from a more normal angle like this? Now we have a problem. Now we have 4 additional diagonal lines here, and it is game over. No, I'm joking, it's not game over. We know what to do with diagonal lines. We just connect them to a vanishing point. We are going to add a new vanishing point for these 4 guys. So we will have 2 vanishing points, hence the name, two-point perspective. So these 4 guys that go that way all meet up at one point, and these 4 guys that go that way all meet up at one point. And these 4 vertical lines, well, they just stay vertical lines for now. So the basic idea stays the same. We are connecting diagonal lines to vanishing points. Except now, with two-point perspective, we have 2 vanishing points, both of them on the horizon line. Let's draw a simple cube again, so you can see how this works. This time we are just going to draw a single line, a vertical line to start with. Then we connect the top and the bottom of that line to both vanishing points, like that. Now we define the 2 sides of the cube by adding 2 more vertical lines, one this side and one that side. Then connect this corner to that vanishing point and connect this corner to that vanishing point. And like magic, we have a cube again. Let's add some shading to make it look even cooler. And again, we can add more cubes using this formula right on the horizon line like this, or above the horizon line like that. And it works great as long as we keep connecting the diagonal lines to the vanishing points. Okay, time to level up. Let's try drawing a ladder using two-point perspective. Starting with the 2 vertical bars here, slightly slanted, then connecting all the steps to a vanishing point. And we also connect the steps, the other sides of the steps, to the other vanishing point. So the steps are just like boxes. They are just very flat boxes stacked one on top of the other. And we can add some depth and some shading as well. I think my ladder looks a bit like a bookcase, but it will do. Let's make it more interesting. Let's draw a chair. This is going to be a more complex drawing, so just to make it easier, it can be good to start with a quick sketch to more or less see what you are aiming at, and then we redo it with the diagonal lines neatly lined up to the 2 vanishing points. That is the basic chair shape done. Now we can start refining it and adding details, and you could really knock yourself out with the level of detail. Just keep following the rule. Every line that isn't vertical has to connect to its corresponding vanishing point. As long as you do that, it will work. My chair is looking uncomfortable. Maybe a slightly slanted backrest will be better. And some detail in the backrest. Still not the most comfortable chair in the world, but it works, right? Let's look at a real-world example. If we just pause this video for a second, you could draw this scene with two-point perspective. These lines on the table, and these ones on the lamp and the cupboard and the counter all share the same vanishing point. Even the lines of the wooden flooring go to that same vanishing point, somewhere outside the picture frame. And on this side too, the other side of the table and the lamp and the cupboards all go this way to meet up at the other vanishing point. 2-point perspective. Not that difficult and insanely powerful. Okay, moving on to 3-point perspective. If we look at our cube animation again, you'll notice that we have vanishing points on 2 of the 3 axes, on the x-axis and on the z-axis, but we don't have a vanishing point on the y-axis. Those vertical lines are just vertical. Well, actually they are not. It all depends on the viewing angle. If we move up and look down on the cube and we extend those vertical lines, they also have a vanishing point. So that is 3-point perspective, 3 vanishing points, 1 for each axis. Here they are side by side. 1-point perspective is perspective on 1 axis, 2-point on 2 axes, and 3-point on 3 axes. Let's try 3-point perspective. Let's draw a cube again. So we still have the 2 vanishing points on the horizon. Then at the bottom of the page we add the 3rd vanishing point. Just like last time, we start with the corner closest to us, only this time it connects to the 3rd vanishing point. Then we again connect the top and the bottom of that line to the 2 vanishing points on the horizon line, just like before. But now comes the difference. With 2-point perspective we added 2 vertical lines here. But now, instead of vertical lines, we are going to connect those lines to the 3rd vanishing point, like so. And everything else is just the same as 2-point perspective. And that is basic 3-point perspective. Now, in real life, you will rarely use 3-point perspective because that 3rd vanishing point is usually far off the page, so far off the page that the vertical lines look like they are just vertical. It is only in a scene like this where the 3rd vanishing point comes into play. You can see here that the buildings all seem to lean outward. And if we follow those lines down, let's just zoom out, then you can see that they all converge nicely at the 3rd vanishing point way down there. You can also see this in action when looking up at tall buildings. Then that 3rd vanishing point is up above the buildings somewhere, high above the horizon line. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes you see all 3 vanishing points in action. Okay, that takes care of linear perspective. 1-point, 2-point and 3-point perspective done. Technically there are more. There are 4, 5 and 6-point perspective, but that's academic, not much use to us when drawing the real world around us. The next one that we care about is atmospheric perspective. And this is something completely different. If we look at this scene, notice that this leaf down here is fairly dark compared to the other stuff in the image. It is close to the camera. If we move a little further away, like to that opposite bank there, the contrast is far less. It's like it fades more into the surroundings the further the thing is from the camera. And these trees are a little further away, so they fade more. And this one fades a lot, and this one is barely visible. So we can tell how far away something is by how much contrast it has. Usually things that are close appear darker, but that's not necessarily the case. It is the contrast that is higher the closer it is. The dark areas are darker and the light areas are lighter. Then it fades more to gray the further it moves away. The reason for this is simply that there is more air between you and something that is far away. Air is mostly transparent, but not completely. And the more hazy or misty the air, the easier it is to see atmospheric perspective in action. In logos, you can have a lot of fun with this, easily creating beautiful depth by simply having higher contrast in the front and lower contrast in the back. You guessed it, the links to these logos are in the description. Okay, that takes care of perspective, but there are two more things that you need to understand if you are going to use perspective effectively. The first thing is cylinders. You can draw cylinders in perspective too. It's a bit more tricky than straight lines, but not much. Here's how it works. Here we have a basic cylinder. I made it semi-transparent and I added the blue rings just to make it easier to see what we are talking about to explain the perspective. Now, if we view the cylinder from this angle, it looks like the bottom blue ellipse is just a straight line. And if we tilt it a bit to view it from this angle, the top looks like a straight line. If we tilt it a bit more, then both are again ellipses. But notice that the top blue ring is flatter than the bottom one. This is the big secret of cylinders in perspective. The more we tilt the cylinder, the rounder those ellipses become. Actually, the further they are from the horizon line, the rounder they become. This is also called the pitch of the ellipse. The flatter ones have more pitch and the rounder ones have less pitch. Okay, but the question then is, how do we know how round to make those ellipses? Well, we know how to work with straight lines in perspective, so we can draw a box in perspective. We know how to do that. Then we use that box as a guide to draw the cylinder in perspective. It's not quite that simple, but almost. Let's do it step by step. So we start with a very simple box in 1 point perspective. We have the top side of the box here and the bottom side here. Those are important. We don't care about the sides of the box now. We care about the top face and the bottom face because they will show us where the ellipses will go and what size the ellipses must be. So I'm simply going to draw an ellipse in each one, with the ellipse touching the edges on all 4 sides, like that. Now if you're drawing this on a computer, you can call this done. Go, take a coffee break. But if you are drawing this by hand, it can be tricky to get the shape of that ellipse just right. It helps if you first find the center. You can do that easily by connecting the 4 corners, and then where those lines intersect, that is the center. You may say that that's not really the center of the ellipse, because look, this top half is clearly smaller than the bottom half, and you'd be right, but that is what we want. That purple dot is the perspective center. It works like this. If we have a circle with a dot to show us the center, and we tilt the circle flat, then that dot appears closer to the other side than to our side. That's good, that's what we want. The half of the circle that is closer to us should appear bigger than the half that is furthest from us. Okay, doing good so far. Now, to help you more with the shape of your ellipse, draw a vertical line and a horizontal line through the perspective center, like that. And then these 4 points where those lines cross the edges of the box, that's where the ellipse will touch the edges. So you can draw those bits of the ellipse in there to start and then connect it all to complete the ellipse. Okay, if you are with me so far, then well done. You know how to draw a cylinder in perspective. And not just a cylinder, but any roundish thing. The same applies if you are drawing a more complex object, like this vase. Or maybe you call it a vase. Tomato, tomato. To draw a vase, you just draw the rings in perspective and then add the outline. And if you are brave, draw a chess piece in perspective. Why not? It's just ellipses. There are more of them, but this isn't difficult. It's just more ellipses. Most of the time your cylinders will need only 1 point perspective, but you can use 2 or 3 point perspective if you want. Let's try 2 point perspective above the horizon line, just to make it interesting. Everything is mostly the same. The difference comes in here. These two lines that go through the perspective center used to be horizontal. Now, with 2-point perspective, they connect to a vanishing point. That's the only real change. And with 3-point perspective, those vertical lines that go through the perspective center will connect to the third vanishing point. There is a classic mistake that people make with clock towers that I just have to mention here. With a clock tower, you have a circle on the side of a cube. Well, now that you know how to draw cubes and cylinders in perspective, this is easy. You know how to fit that ellipse onto the side of the cube. It's the same as drawing a cylinder. One more thing that I want to show you, and I saved the best for last. Perspective applies to everything. You can even draw a human in perspective. No, I'm not talking about this handsome fellow, but he is kind of useful because this is the basic idea. You can see that the top of his head and his shoulders and his hips and his feet are all in perspective. They sit on lines that connect to a vanishing point. Even the hairline and the eyes and the nose and the beard all in perspective. A great example of perspective in action. And exactly the same applies with a less blocky figure. This guy sitting on a bench shares the perspective of the bench. Shoulders, knees, feet, all on perspective lines. Now this does not always work. Bodies can bend and twist in a million different ways, and sometimes the viewing angle doesn't give us much to work with. But perspective can still apply to individual parts, like when you draw a face. If you think of a face in terms of rough geometric forms, you can quite easily construct it in perspective. The eyebrows, eyes, nose, mouth, chin, hairline, etc. Perspective applies to everything. And that's a wrap. There are two types of people in the world, those who understand perspective and those who don't. Congratulations, you are now among those who understand it. You know almost everything there is to know about perspective. Mission accomplished for this video. Remember to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. See you next time.